Jonty, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty there, mate. I'm sorry about that. So many screens open, but I guess that you don't really need an introduction, and people don't really need to know what you've done too many times. I'm sure that they've seen you playing many years of your career, and can also access a lot of this information via YouTube. Mate, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Ben, good to be back. Thank you with the webinar shorts, and it was interesting. I just thought because I was running out David Boone and Alan Border there, I see from Australia, obviously, that you put like a spanner in the work. So it was obviously a bit painful for we now Swedish cricket now, so we have to forget that it's South Africa versus Australia. We're now working towards the same goal. But yes, it's good to be back and chatting to everyone. I think from my perspective, I'm sitting here in Abu Dhabi. I've had 3 days of quarantine, 2 days of practice, and in fact, we had an extra day of quarantine, so I got an additional day sitting in my hotel doing nothing. And if you haven't watched the clips, which I never got to see, the one thing you might have noticed in my cricket playing days is that I had a great deal of energy in the field. And sitting in a hotel room for 4 days is probably the toughest job that I've ever had. So looking forward to starting the games, the series tomorrow, the competition, and getting it underway. So really good to be talking, and specifically around about fielding. You know, I think it's obviously come a very long way. Fielding has, and for a long time, you know, it was quite strange. I mean, I was probably ranked as the #1 fielder in the world, but just because there was no #2 or #3, so easy to be #1 when there's just a pool of one. So the amazing thing is that how quickly, or I suppose not quickly, this is, you know, from 1992 onwards, there was an understanding and an appreciation of my fielding for the first 8 years that I was probably playing. And then from 2000, 2003 World Cup, a real focus on all the teams and in every format, because T20 cricket was only really launched and took off in 2007 with the T20 World Cup, which was hosted in South Africa. And only then did people start appreciating the fact that, hold on, there is this third element to the game. It's no longer just about batting and bowling. If you're fielding, it's just as important, because one run, there's so many games came down to just one run being the difference between the two teams, that, you know, it's the easiest way to find that victory, to find that one run, was actually in the field. So it wasn't just about hitting the last ball for 6 or for a boundary or taking the wicket off the last ball. The best way to find that one run that made the difference was in the field. So I think there's been an interesting shift in the approach and the attitude by everybody. And the biggest focus and the biggest change in the cricket players of today, to the start of my generation, is the athletic ability. And it really is key. I mean, I'll talk about fielding to anybody and everybody, because it's something that I'm really passionate about. But I think my biggest asset was the fact that I played so many different sports growing up in South Africa, from football to hockey to tennis. And all those sports require lateral movement. And that was probably the one thing that really set me aside in my fielding, was the ability to move left or right. And, you know, I think it's a key for all of us. And also an understanding too, if you're a cricket player, don't be scared to play in other sports, even if it's just fun and for social or for fitness. We can use all the skills that we get in our game. We can draw on the skills from other sports too. So even though we want to focus on our cricket and we want to play good cricket, don't be scared to kick a ball around, to hit a ball, badminton, you know, whatever you, in a bandy, now that I'm Swedish. Anything that gets you moving laterally is going to be really good, especially for your fielding, which is what we want to focus on this evening.
Jonty, my brother, who's a mad cricket fan, when he heard that you were coming across to Sweden, he said, "Oh, Jonty Rhodes, a quarter of the earth is covered by water and the rest is covered by Jonty Rhodes." I thought that was a pretty nice...
Very generous.
Mate, when we're talking about fielding from a general standpoint, what qualities do you think make a great fielder?
Well, I mean, Ben, there's different elements to fielding now. I mean, you have specialist boundary riders, you have specialist inner ring fielders, and in the longer version, you have, you know, guys who stand in the slips and around the bat, which really are specialist positions and need constant sort of practice and working on those disciplines. But I think key elements of fielding, and I touched on it briefly in my introduction, was the ability to move laterally. Because cricket, every other aspect of cricket is a linear game. I mean, you bowl, in straight lines, and the more you're in a straight line, the better. You're batting in straight lines, and the more you're in a straight line, hitting through the ball, the better the result's going to be. But from a fielding point of view, the ability to move laterally is a huge advantage. And I think because I was quite short in stature, to dive around, to get around and to move and change directions was a huge asset to me. So the ability to move laterally, but you don't have to be the smallest guy in the field to be the best fielder. Because the interesting thing was I did my first sort of coaching job as a fielding coach was with the South African team in the lead up to the 2007 World Cup. And we had the likes of Morne Morkel, who's 6'4", Andre Null, who's 6'2", but he's built like a wall. And these big fast bowlers at practice, because they knew the ball was coming to them, because I do sort of one-on-one coaching, at practice they moved really well, even though they were big, because they were anticipating the ball coming to them. And when they were in the game, because they were bowlers and maybe they'd bowled a good over or a bad over, or were thinking about the next over they have to bowl, their mind and their focus wasn't on, man, the next ball could come to me. And when you were that big and so that slow, if you weren't anticipating the ball to come to you, you had no chance to recover. And when you're 6'4", it's like somebody chopping down a tree. You just see Morne Morkel just fall over, and the ball has gone past him and sort of rushed to the boundary, and he hasn't even hit the ground yet. So the ability to move laterally is a huge asset. I think, because if I was more gifted from a hand-eye coordination, from a faster reflexes, I would have been a much better batter. I mean, my average in Test cricket was 35, which is average. My average in 50-over cricket, also 35, so average. But if I'd been, a faster reflexes-wise, or, gifted with regards to better eyesight, my batting average would have been way better. So it wasn't about me being better than anybody else. I think the biggest differentiator for me was that I was expecting, in fact, I was hoping, I love to field, so I was expecting every single ball to come to me, which is what commentators will talk about. Jonty Rhodes got good anticipation. It's not really anticipation when you're thinking, okay, if the ball is going to come to me, I must be ready to go. And studying, I would kind of watch the ball, obviously, or watch the bat, that's where the ball's coming from, but study the batsman's body language. Because if he's going to drop and run or play a square cut, their body language is different, and I have to react differently. So I always gave myself a slight edge because I was expecting every single ball to come to me. So that, you can become a better fielder without even doing a single second of practice in a game. And you're a better fielder already if you are anticipating every single ball to come to you. That's how easy it is.
And with thoughts on that, there's a lot of stopping and starting in cricket, as you know, Jonty, and as a long time to hold your focus. Did you have any particular strategies to keep yourself so alert and also thinking about or anticipating that ball coming to you? Could you talk to us a little bit about some of the strategies you used there?
I think it's the same with batting, Ben. I mean, if you're going to play in a test match over 5 days, if you're looking to score 100 in a test match, it's going to take you about 3 hours. And there's no ways you can focus every second or every minute of those 3 hours. When you're batting, you learn to switch on and switch off. So you kind of clear your mind. And as soon as a bowler turns around to approach in his delivery or start his run up, you would then switch on again and look for the ball as a batter. So the same thing in the field. I mean, for 90 overs in a test match, it could be that last over of the day where a catch goes down or an opportunity is missed that could swing or sort of upset the balance of the game. And for me, it was the ability to switch on and switch off, because even though I had energy, even though I was fairly fit coming from sort of a hockey season into cricket, if you didn't switch on and then switch off and have that ability to do that, you would be mentally pretty exhausted by the 4th hour of play in a day, especially, the subcontinent when you're playing it, it's really hot and humid. So just as the bowler turned to start his run-up, that was my signal to focus on my job. So I kind of watch the bowler to halfway, and then from then on, I'll just focus on the bat. And like I said, the bigger picture of the batter's body language, because that would give me some idea of where they were looking to hit the ball. So drop and run, so I must come forward or be ready for a big cut or a solid drive. because it's a totally different body language that they're displaying, which just gave me a split second to react faster. So the switch on, switch off was the key. And it was a big part of what I did in a day's play. Because as well, I mean, you go to India and there's 100,000 people we used to play in front of in Calcutta. It can be a little bit noisy. So, in fact, you got guys standing 20 meters away from you. You can't hear them shouting at you to move, wider or closer. So you have to, I think it's important to be in the field to kind of captain your own area, because you can't have the captain telling you where to stand or where to go. You have to be aware of where you are, what the job is you need to do, and read the situation. So captaining your own area was something that I did every single ball, but the switch on, switch off is the only way you can keep your focus throughout a full day's play.
Love that, captaining your own area. Really good takeaway there. I was thinking also about just a little bit of detail in your switching off. Some athletes talk about having mental holidays or, whatever it might be. Merv Hughes was a guy who used to interact a lot with the crowd. Right. Did you have anything in particular that you like to do in your switching off, or anything interesting that you did?
Well, I think Merv Hughes was on the boundary usually. So, fast bowlers in that area were generally fielding at third man and fine leg. And Merv was probably looking for a beer from somebody to steal a sip of a beer at third man or fine leg. So my conversation was generally to the batters, to my own mates. I was too far removed fielding in the circle and to interact with the crowd. But, we had in Port Elizabeth, there used to be a band that would come in, and it was an official band. It was just, one of the schools, their band would come to every single game, and they would play, really catchy tunes. So you'd kind of dance around, clap, wave to them, say thank you, but do a lot of talking to the umpire, just telling him to stay on his toes, and just chat, just anything that would help you relax. So whether it was to your own teammates, because I wasn't a quiet guy, as you can imagine with this energy. I do talk way too much. So some guys go quiet and they just kind of inwardly just switch off. But for me, it was more interaction. So it was chatting to who was ever in my area. And usually it was an umpire as I was walking past, because I would go and fetch the cap of the bowlers as well. Sort of allow them to go straight from the boundary to their mark, save some time between overs, also save their energy. It was only 10 steps, but maybe that was the 10 steps at the end of the day that they required. So I would go and grab the cap or their jersey or their jumper, take it to the umpire, put their marker in place, and then dash off to backward point. So, it wasn't like I was standing around switching on, switching off, and just deep breathing. I was definitely moving and making as much noise as possible, even in my downtime.
Super, thanks so much for that. And coming to training, Jonty, what do you believe has been the best investment of your time as a player, as a fielder? How would you best spent your time, and what's been most valuable to you?
Ben, I think what was interesting, I mean, at the start of my career, when I started playing for South Africa, I was 22 years old. I'd been playing first class cricket for only 3 years, and nobody else in my first class team was interested in fielding at all. I mean, I don't think we ever did a fielding practice as such. So, there was another young guy who would come down and hit me catches, and that was pretty much it. But when we went to the World Cup in 1992, we had no international experience because South Africa had been banned from international sport for 27 years. And Kepler Wessels was our captain, and he had actually played for Australia for 10 years and then come back. He had immigrated to Australia to play. And then he came back and captained South Africa. And he just said, guys, even with, because his big concern was, we have no international experience. So what do you call on when the chips are down? And he just said, there's two elements that we can be the best team in the world, even with the lack of experience. And so we can be the fittest team and we can be the best fielding side. So from that point of view, I mean, we really worked hard. Once I'd made the South African team, as a team, we worked hard on our fielding. And because I enjoyed my fielding so much, and I suddenly had a group of players who, this was now actually their profession. We weren't getting paid much, but we were in Australia for 2.5 months, or England for 3.5 months, or Pakistan for 2 months. So, you had time at the ground. So rather than just sit around do nothing, I had players who were quite happy to come and practice with me. But my fielding, I think the key there for me was I spent a lot of time trying to simulate what would happen in a game. And at the start of my career, not enough throwing at the stumps, which is why when the 92 World Cup came along and I dived in the wickets to run out Inzamam ul Haq, which kind of launched my career and made people sit up and take notice of fielding, was because I backed my strength. And my strength as a fielder was, I was like a goalkeeper. That was my job, to stop the ball going to the boundary. Runouts, catches were bonus. So the runouts I hadn't worked enough on. And, I think that's one thing where a player like Ricky Ponting, he almost had a baseball technique, and he threw the ball so accurately. And I wish at the start of my career I'd spent more time working on my throwing, which was an aspect of my game that got better towards the end of my career. But it was certainly something where I didn't focus a great deal on. I focused on my job, and that was setting up a 5-meter goal and trying to stop the ball from going past it. Not just asking the player to hit the ball to me, because in the game, 99% of the time, I'm going to catch a ball that comes straight to me. It was that kind of one-hand diving catch, the one-hand stop, the things that turn a game. I wanted to practice those. That I kind of back myself then in a match situation to take those kind of catches.
Great insight. Thanks for sharing that. If you don't go, you'll never know. The philosophy behind that thinking, Jonty, could you talk to us about a little bit about your thoughts behind what that means?
Ben, I think it's interesting. I mean, I worked for Standard Bank in South Africa when I first retired from playing cricket. I mean, I've trained as a business banker. I have a Bachelor of Commerce degree. And then actually we launched the Pro 20, which is kind of now evolved into the IPL, the World Cup, T20 World Cup. And, it was an interesting philosophy for me, if you don't go, you'll never know. And in a corporate environment, I talk to people about the freedom to fail is vital if you're going to succeed. Freedom to fail. I mean, none of us like to fail. We've all got egos. You don't have to play for your country to have an ego. All of us in any environment have an ego, and none of us like to be. So when I worked for the bank, at the end of the year, you'd have a report card. And if you hadn't achieved your goals or your targets, you get a negative report. And it might not be in every department, but it might, you get 8 out of 10, but two of the areas that you hadn't succeeded from a budget point of view was a negative mark. And none of us like to fail in any environment. So the key for me was a case of how do you, and what Hansie Cronje had done as the captain from sort of 1996 onwards in South African team, he appointed Alan Donald as the sort of the fast bowling captain, because Alan was the best fast bowler in the world at the time, and then Gary Kirsten was one of the top, opening batters, and he said anybody who got questioned, Gary Kirsten is captain. So again, good leadership, and that Hansie delegated senior players in almost as management, and then I was the fielding captain. So if I saw anything that I felt needed improving or any players that need to work on stuff, then it was my job to go and make it happen. And I wasn't going to go tell somebody to be Jonty Rhodes in the field, because we all built differently. Some guys were fast bowlers, they had different bodies, and it was more a case of me walking up to them if something, and just quietly just going, well, now we'll never know. Because if you don't go, you never know. I mean, you might have missed it, you might have dropped it, but until you go for it. So that freedom to fail is vital if you're going to succeed, was kind of one of the mantras that I had throughout my career. So I would rather dive for the ball and miss it or drop it even, but know that if I'd stood there and watched the ball go past and think, man, I wonder if I could have saved that if I had gone for it. So that was my sort of whole philosophy. And it's interesting because it's applied in every environment, because a lot of it is about we don't want to disappoint, or we don't want to fail in something that is just beyond our boundaries or our comfort zone. So we can all catch the ball that comes here. We can all stop the ball that comes close to us. But it's a diving effort where we might not make the catch that sometimes holds us back. And it's that split second. If you're not committed to go for everything, then you're going to be too late in getting there. So that for me was a case of I was prepared to dive for anything that came, even in my, kind of past my 5-meter goals. I would dive for it anyway, just to see maybe the ball swung back off the bat because he sliced it, or maybe I had a good bounce and I could get a hand on it. But if it didn't go for it, you'd never know.
In on the theme of failure, Jonty, just thinking about favourite failures. Do you have a favourite failure that you remember or that you think about in the past that you've learnt the most from?
Well, and it's interesting because it's probably when you're more successful that's when we need to look carefully what we're doing, because we sometimes then tend to gloss over any mistakes that we've made, or we then carry on from where we left off as opposed to going back to the basics. But from a mistakes point of view, I one thing that I certainly do remember is I've been dropped for 2 years from Test cricket. And, I was so eager to get back. We're playing against England. I was just so happy to be back on the Test ground again. I was making so much noise and I was talking to everybody that I forgot to just actually watch the ball. So I put a catch down off Mike Atherton, and he'd actually complained to the umpire because I was making so much noise prior to me being dropped, or to me dropping the catch. But it really was just a case of I'm there to do a job, and I know what I have to do because that's how I practice. I would practice like I was playing in a match situation, but I kind of let the emotions of being back in the Test team get over me, and I just took my eye off the ball. I mean, and not literally, but I just think with all the energy, I didn't channel it into what I'd used to be channeling it, and that was making sure that when the ball is hit, I was 100% ready. I was more not focused on, but I was certainly spending my energy on just the excitement of being back in the playing 11 in the Test side.
Fascinating, mate. Walking around associate nations, walking around, people playing cricket. I know as a coach, you can't leave without leaving a tip to someone. But in regards to fielding and so forth, what do you see as some of the low-hanging fruit that people do fundamentally that you think could, as you said, you mentioned one already, of being alert and ready, anticipating the ball was one. But are there any things that you could think of that people could take action with today to implement into their practice or into their games in regards to fielding?
I think, Ben, the first thing I try and do is that I forced everybody to catch reverse cup. I mean, we're all familiar. There's the sort of regulation or the orthodox way is catching with your fingers pointing down, especially for a flat catch if you're in the circle. But when you catch with the fingers pointing up, the reverse cup, it actually forces you to take one step, because I'll tell you why. You can stand here and put your hands, if you've got long arms, your head is a long way from the ball. If you're catching it the regulation way with your fingers pointing down. But if you're catching reverse cup, it means you have to take a step. I'm going to step out of the frame here, because if I stand here, but the ball's to this position, I have to take one more step to catch on the same line. And what it does, it just brings my head behind the line of the ball. So I ask the guys to practice that. I don't force them to catch reverse cup in the game, because cricket is a game of habit. But the habit I'm trying to introduce is the foot movement. We always, from a fielding point of view, always think, okay, you've got to have good hands or soft hands. But I'm just focusing on people's feet. So play sport, move laterally. Anything you do from a fielding point of view, try and incorporate shuttle running. Run to the left, throw the ball. Run to the right, throw the ball. Don't just stand still and throw it, because we're not putting our body under sort of match stress or match situation. So as much as possible, get yourself moving sideways, whether you're going to throw, and especially if you're going to catch, because it makes a difference in the game. Your body positioning is key to catching a ball.
Fascinating, interesting insight to hear this. What about, we've spoken a little bit about hands on knees, hands behind your backs for those young kids. I think a lot of coaches, they get so bogged down in the batting and the bowling and so forth, and they miss some of the kids standing out there on the field. Are there things that we can do for our youngsters as well, make sure that message is staying with them so they can force good habits as they grow up into cricket?
I think the key for me, Ben, is that a lot of the coaches will ask the players to walk in with the bowling, and that's probably just to give the coaches a broader view of, are the players fast asleep? Are they picking their nose? Are they looking at their mom and dad on the boundary, or the girlfriend on the boundary? What is actually happening with the fielder? Because if they're walking in, then there's a good chance that they are expecting the ball to come to them. But you can walk in with your eyes closed. If you're not expecting the ball to come to you, walking in with the bowling is not going to help. So with regards to the body position, when I'm asking the guys to coach, I talk about the split jump position. Because if you're a tennis player, you watch the tennis players when they're returning a serve, they almost walk in to cut the angle down, and then before they can go left or right, they get into a split jump position. So it's not a duk-duk, 1 foot in front of the other. It's into a position where both feet land together, and with your weight on your toes, and it allows you to move left or right. So when I first started coaching the South African team, I actually told, especially the fast bowlers who were fielding at third man and fine leg, I said, don't walk in with the bowling, because then I can't tell if you're ready for the ball. I want you to stand still And just before the bowler delivers the ball, 2-step split jump, because that split jump puts you in a position where your hands are kind of next to your waist, or sort of, yeah, I suppose waist, chest, or shoulder width apart, next to your waist, and they can go to the ground or they can come up to receive the ball. So that for me was the key. The walking into the bowling didn't tell you anything, because under a cap or under a wide brim hat, you can be fast asleep when you're walking into the bowling. So the split jump is something, if you're a coach, if you're a player, puts you in a position to move laterally, to come forward, to turn and go, but it also puts your body in a good position to catch a ball when it comes to you. So you split jump with your hands, kind of between waist and knee height and shoulder width apart, and you're ready to take anything. So split jump has always been a focus for me as a fielding coach.
Jonty, we've just got a couple of minutes left. I thought I'd prompt just a couple of questions that were a little bit off topic for you, but
Sure.
A little bit more about your career as a player. The first one I thought about was, who did you wish was watching you play at every game or match? Is there anyone in particular?
Oh, no, I grew up not having many South African cricketing heroes because of the sports isolation. But I was fortunate enough to actually play with one of my cricketing heroes, Peter Kirsten. And when he was playing, he was actually fielding right next to me. So before the era of Rhodes and Herschel Gibbs together, it was Rhodes and Peter Kirsten. So I didn't have to wish for anything. I actually had the guy fielding next to me. So he was my cricketing hero as a youngster, and I got to play in the same team as him. So at the end of his career and the start of mine. So it was pretty special, that.
Fantastic. What about if there was a billboard advertise your career? What would it say? Or how would you like to be remembered as a cricketer?
Interesting thing is, from a billboard perspective, the highlights of my career actually were pictures, and that's the crazy thing. Most players, their highlights are a big score, or taking wickets in a game, or their stats, and mine were certainly pictures, kind of catching the ball in my fingertips or diving into the stumps. But I think the billboard for me would be just a blank one, because it would, sorry, we couldn't get Jonty Rhodes for the picture because he's practicing. And I think, the interesting thing, I remember doing a coaching session with Herschel Gibbs at the South African Cricketing Academy, and Herschel, when we were introduced, the coach introduced us, and Herschel said, guys, they'll talk about Jonty, his records he's got as a fielder, but the one thing that none of the records will tell you, but as a player, as a fellow South African cricket player, Jonty's legacy for me was the way that he practiced, and that was pretty amazing. So yeah, so if there's a billboard depicting me, it would be, sorry, we couldn't get Jonty, he was practicing.
I love that. That's so great. Fantastic. Last one for you, mate. How did being a cricketer help you become a better person?
Ben, I mean, that is an incredible question for me. And to put things again in perspective, 27 years of sporting isolation, no international sport, economic sanctions because of the apartheid regime in South Africa. And apartheid was basically a white minority government. And what they dictated was that only white people could go to a certain school, only white people could go to a beach, only white people could play on these grounds, only white people could use these facilities. And, so I grew up playing against white kids, having white friends, and not being exposed at all to people of different color, different culture, in an environment where they were seen as equal. And it's crazy. I think that's the most incredible thing. And I'm so sad, because only at the end of my cricketing career, because when you're a cricket player playing internationally, you fly into a country, you see the airport, you see the ground, you see the hotel, and that's it. And you stay away from local people because you just need a break. And as a coach, when I was coaching in India, I've done 10 IPLs in India, is that every single season I get on a motorbike there and I ride, because if you're flying over a country, you don't experience the culture, you don't experience the people. So as much as possible, I have a bicycle and I have a motorbike. And because the traffic is so bad, it takes the same amount of time whether you powered by horsepower or you powered by pedal power. But I ensure that I got out as much as possible and met people on the street. And street food I would eat, and the guys taking me for a motorbike ride would, Jonty, if you get sick, don't blame it on us. Mumbai street food is notorious if you're a visitor, or infamous. Delhi, I talk about the Delhi belly. And it was more a case of me understanding or appreciating that the more I learn about other people, the more I will learn about myself. So I'm still on a path of discovery, and I just wish as a cricket player I had understood that at that stage, because it was just about let me become a better cricket player as opposed to let me become a better person, and my cricket will benefit because of that.
Jonty, fantastic words. We're so grateful to be able to listen and learn with your experience, not only on the field, but off the field. And thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. I think everyone will join me in thanking Jonty for his time and for his words this evening. Please be sure to sign up for next week's seminar short on strength training. It'll be a killer also. Jump in there and get yourself registered. Thanks so much for everyone participating, and thanks so much to you, Jonty.
Thanks everyone. Ben, thanks for having me. Good to chat again.
Bye for now.